First of all, biomass, as I'm going to approach it, it relates specifically to pinyon and juniper biomass, and biomass is a non-timber forest product. Until about 10 years ago, the Forest Service National Forests, only about 7 of them had complete policies on dealing with non-timber forest products. So dealing with biomass is a relatively new thing. Today I'm going to present some models on how to sell or market biomass. A little different approach to some of the previous speakers, but I was so glad with some of Dr. Miller's kind of setting the stage for some of the things I'm going to say, and also the speaker from INL. How I would sell biomass, hell, I'd do it on eBay. That's where I'd sell it. If you look, where's the pointer? What is it, the red one?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's one of them.
Okay. If you notice, they're selling pine nuts, and they're going to sell, how much are they going to sell? Where is it? It's not 5 pounds of Nevada pine nuts. Look at the per pound price they're getting for pine nuts. They're $16 a pound, and yeah, they're selling 2 sold. And why is pine nuts important to my presentations? Pine nuts is what I call an indicator element. It's an indicator from an indicator species, and that's the pinyon pine, and has to do with environmentalism. And I'll get to that later on, but I just wanted to set the stage as there are ways, very successful ways of selling non-timber forest products. I'm going to talk about bright spots. Bright spots are successful ventures that are worth emulating. This is a model, and I hate PowerPoints. PowerPoints can make smart people stupider faster than gin. But you got to have, sometimes you got to show the model, and this is the model. This model is proposed and featured by a good buddy of mine, Rusty Dram, U.S. Forest Products Lab. It talks about the 7 critical factors of success. I'm going to show you where an operator didn't pay any attention to these critical factors of success. His business went out, and sadly enough, it killed him. He died of the stress-related illnesses from not paying attention to some of these 7 critical factors. The ones he ignored the most were, what can you make from the resource? Can you sell the products? And can you make any money doing it? This is some of the equipment he tried to use building a pellet plant to sell a commodity in a very limited market. You can see the tub grinder, the separator there. You can see the shape of that bag house there. They tried to sell pellets. He tried to bag it differently because he thought the people couldn't lift 40-pound bags, so he got bags about the same size as the 40-pound bag and only put 20 pounds in it. So when the person picked it up at the market, it was kind of light. But where he really missed is the product, is the raw material input quality. This is pinyon and juniper, and this is, I don't know, this, let me go back here. This guy is sitting right here, Scott Bell, and this guy is Paul Johnson, and he's complaining because this raw material input won't run through his boiler, part of the Fuels for Schools operation in Ely, won't run through the boiler without developing a whole lot of ash. So had that individual had his material tested and looked at it where it was on the inputs versus the outputs, he would have discovered that the ash content was 3% or greater, which limited his product to a utility product, and he could not compete against the Walmarts and the Bimarts and the Kmarts and the other stores that handled imported from Alabama or from wherever, Idaho or wherever, and he couldn't compete with that product in the marketplace. So for want of looking at a model and for want of pre-testing his raw material, he couldn't compete. He had trouble operating. The cash flow just dried up, and he was out of business. I'm going to change that model and switch to another model, which is very similar, but this model deals with what I call the selling of the biomass industry, and it looks at the biomass industry as a complete system. And so we're going to talk about enabling technologies, business model, market adoption, and the key, favorable government policy. And we just had a speaker up here talk about the requirements of having a favorable government policy when you're trying to sell a new industry. And we're also going to talk about bright spots. And I keep bringing up bright spots. And I read this book, and it's called Switch. It's by Heath. And I think everybody in the room should write down Switch. Switch, it's Amazon.com, and it's only about $20. It's how to change things when change is hard. And that's basically what a utilization specialist does. He tries to change things. And I'm going to tell you, changing things in the biomass forest industry is really hard, especially in Nevada, where we never really had a forest industry to begin with. Okay, well, this is yours truly up here. So I love it that people introduce USDA rural development. I worked with Sarah Adler, and I worked with the Moapa band of the Pirates, and they were interested in starting a biomass recovery facility in Moapa, Nevada, which is just about 50 miles outside of Las Vegas. Why were they interested? Well, about the time I got hired, Las Vegas was burying in a landfill 300,000 tons of biomass a year. And it was all the crates and containers, C&D waste, etc. They were burying it, and they were driving it 30 miles one way to do it. All right? That would be illegal in California. You don't bury biomass. Gee, what do they know that we don't know? Okay, so what we did is we got a USDA Rural Development RBEG grant. And we bought this here tub grinder. And then we leased some other equipment. And lo and behold, we went into the biomass recovery business. If you can see, this is a job created by USDA Rural Development Investment. This lady there just happens to be the USDA Rural Development Director for Nevada, Sarah Adler. And I got as a side note, when I took her on this tour, I said, Sarah, how would you like to run that machine? Holy smokes. Squeal, run up this catwalk, and she actually loaded it, and it was great. And then she grabbed a handful and put it in a baggie and took it home. All right. Selling of the biomass industry. First of all, you need an innovative business model. You guys can read. I don't got to read that stuff to you. And it's all being recorded, so you can go back and look at it. What we want to talk about, wait a minute, let me go back here. We want to talk about the profit formula, resources and processes a little bit here. Okay, this slide comes from a Humboldt State University professor, Hans Sup Han, and I attended one of his conferences, and lo and behold, he said that calling felling, bunching, skidding, loading, grinding, and hauling, and for those that don't know what those are processes in the chain to deliver biomass to, in his particular case, an energy plant. And in his part of California, in his studies, it showed about $55 a bone-dry ton. Okay? So let's say we're going to make something, and what can you make from the resource? Can you sell those products? What's the appropriate technology? Well, I am a born-again biocharist. All right? I'm sorry, but once you get exposed to some of this stuff, it's like that sawdust that Craig Rollins has running through his veins. It's got you. It's captivated you. One of the things you can make from biomass is biochar. All right? If it grows, it's biomass, and you can make biochar out of it. All right? So everything you ever wanted to know about biochar is in this book. I want you to focus on this little microscopic look at biochar, and look at these little fungi up here. And that'll come in my discussion later. Okay, so we got biochar. Excellent, Dr. Miller. What kind of technology do you want to use to make biochar? Okay, what insertion level are you going to be in the marketplace? This is what I call a barbecue. And Tim Reeder is partially in the audience, is partially responsible for that barbecue being in Colorado right now, because the guy who built that barbecue attended one of his technology transfer classes. All right? And he and I got to talking, and I said, biochar is the way to go. He not only built this one, he built 29 others. And where he uses those, he uses them in the Front Range, which is totally decimated due to the beetle kill. And he takes this biomass. He's got a little mini excavator that lifts the lid off this barbecue. It's 6 feet tall, 7 feet across. He stuffs it full of that, puts the lid back, lights it, and walks away. A couple days he comes back, they empty it. And they have got biochar, and they process it. Here's how, and yes, it smokes. And Mark Knabe has given me some great ideas how to take some of that smoke and run it back through, all right? In this particular technology, you don't have transportation of your biomass very far because you process it on site, okay? Let's jump up a little bit as we move forward. Let's go to something like, this is Jonah Levine's machine, Biochar Solutions. I can get you his contact information, but this one does a little bit better. It's got an automatic, it's got a conveyor feeder. It goes into the hopper. It goes into the gasification unit. Unfortunately, it's not hooked up to much, so they flare off the gases that come off. And then right here, they collect the char. This machinery is in something like the $100,000 range. The previous was in like about the $6,000 range. And then this one, this is the Sonoma, California Compost Pyrolysis facility, where one of their products happens to be biochar. Now, when you go on the internet and go do it and look at their website, they are selling this biochar for $1 a pound. Right? James Gaspard, with that little barbecue, just sold 3 weeks ago 50,000 pounds of biochar for $1 a pound. Now let's do the math real quick. In a typical BLM or Forest Service prescription on a plot, they'll take off 6 tons per acre. Okay, that barbecue gets about a 20% yield. Okay, so 20%, 6 tons, that's 1.2 tons at $1 a pound is $2,400. And it costs $50 a ton to get it there. So that's $330 raw material cost. And why is that? Because the prescription can read with removal of material from the land. And the biochar is owned by the contractor. So you got $330 cost of raw material, not total operating cost. And you got a potential retail value of $2,400. And then that's one of the reasons I'm a born-again biocharist. Bright spot. Let me go to this slide. This was some research done up on the Umpqua. Debbie Page Dumrose actually made the biochar in Jonah Levine's unit, and they came back and they spread it out to do a study. All right, so they're getting baseline data. My feeling that the better way to apply biochar is to pelletize it, because I can't see you doing this very long other than a study, but I sure can see you doing it this way, because you can put it in a spreader, you can load it by a helicopter, you can do it in an ATV, all right? But I'd go one better. I would look at taking that pellet and making a designer pellet. And there's some more science that can go over it. And I'm with the Pinyon and Juniper Partnership, and we look at science over the top. And what I would suggest and have suggested is to make that a designer pellet. In some cases, I would take some bacteria, if you would, like a pseudomonad, and I would infuse that pellet with this pseudomonad, which is a bacteria that could retard the growth of cheatgrass. All right? Or I would infuse it with a mycorrhiza fungi, which would encourage the growth of certain forbs. Okay? Or I would use both, and I'd make weed and feed. All right? So if you're going to try to sell something and you have a successful model, because a lot of people use weed and feed, farmers, ranchers understand weed and feed. Okay, who's my business? Who am I going to sell this stuff to? Well, here's Ely, Nevada, right here. And here's a map of some ranches owned by Southern Nevada Water Authority. Now, the reason I'm using that map is because it was in the newspaper. This does not necessarily constitute an endorsement on the part of Southern Nevada Water Authority, although they're a potential client. So you can see that we have in this picture in cursive pinyon and juniper on these foothills. Okay, now this land has already been cleared, and I borrowed the slide from Lance Lindblom, but it really showed what I wanted to show. There are points of contact with pinyon and juniper. There are points of contact with farmers and ranchers There are points of contact with water utilization. There are points of contact with compost. There are points of contact with, well, you may not know this, but there are 10,000 or so people in White Pine County, and they do not recycle their food waste. They send all their food waste to the landfill, which is almost full. All right? That'd be illegal in California, and it'd be illegal in Seattle, and it'd be illegal in Portland, Oregon. All right? Because you're not supposed to do that. So the prison, the hospital, they all send their food waste. So what do you need to build a successful compost program? Well, you need some ingredients. One, you need the biomass, you need the food waste, you need the market. So when you look at developing an industry, you have to pick a product that will really have a lot of application. Now biochar may not be the only one, and it may be drop-in fuels or something like that. But when you look at how to sell biomass, you have to sell the whole system, and you have to engage a wide collaboration of people, like, for instance, the refuse guy that hauls the food waste, the warden at the prison, the farmers, the ranchers. Did I mention the gold mines in northeast Nevada who need biomass amended biochar for their tailings, to reclaim their tailings? So you've literally got a captive market. You've got people who then, when I talk to the ag specialist, and another one of the farmers and ranchers there, he said he was from Nebraska, and they got 8 tons of hay to the acre. Well, I said, how much do you get? He says, well, we only get 4 here. I says, why is that? He says, well, our soils aren't quite as rich, and they're not as deep, et cetera, et cetera. I said, do you have the water? Yeah, we got the water. Do you got the growing cycle? Yeah, our cycle's a little bit longer. I said, so what's missing? He says, well, if I could have a compost operation. So I said, well, you could have, all right? So we've got farmers, we've got ranchers, we've got a very wide, did I mention favorable government policy? When you get the group of people, the county involved, the county commissioners involved, why? Well, because they don't pay for their garbage service there individually. It's part of their tax structure. So you see where I'm going with this? All of these different points of contact, and when you're trying to sell biomass or a biomass system, you have to look at each point and see what contribution it can make to the total. If you just look at one single point, you'll probably miss the boat. Okay, have I said just about what I want to say? Let me think. 5 minutes? Is that when I'm supposed to stop? For those who don't know, Scott's my good friend, professional associate, and my Forest Service handler. Thank you, Scott. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Any questions?
Actually, I thought Jonah got bought out.
He did, but he's still in business. He has the license to produce that machinery.
He was in BEC before, Biochar Energy.
Yes, he was.
And that got bought out. Biochar Solutions is his new.
Yeah, his new company.